Hello, my name's Malcolm Guite, and I'm a professor and a poet from Cambridge in England. And I've been a lifelong enthusiast for C.S. Lewis since I read the Narnia stories as a little boy, and I've continued to read them ever since and find them increasingly profound. But I was really amazed and delighted to hear from some of the Romanian C.S. Lewis scholars that I've met, Denise Vasiliu and others, about this great renaissance of interest in Lewis in Romania. But the story that she told me, which I found absolutely fascinating, was that it was the translation of this children's book at a time when Romania was still under the oppressive rule of Ceausescu, a book which suddenly took on a new life. Of course, Lewis wrote it not as strictly as an allegory, but he wrote it as an emblematic story that would carry many meanings. And this idea of a world in winter and the cruel White Witch and the chief of her secret police, Malgrim, and how Aslan comes to liberate the country and bring a spring and a warmth after this freezing winter of tyranny. When that was translated into Romanian, it began to kindle a hope in people, which was not only the imaginative hope that we have as a child reading the book, but was to do with the great cosmic hope, if you like, of a true liberation, a liberation from all kinds of tyranny. So it had that. Anyway, I was really interested to discover that. But just recently, I made another discovery myself. When I was a school teacher in the early 80s, I wrote some poetry. I was reading the Narnia books with my school children, and I asked them to imagine being poets in Narnia, so I thought I must do the same. And I wrote a poem imagining the Narnians long after the Golden Age, when Aslan has liberated them and High King Peter's been there, looking back on those days of liberation. And I discovered that in my own poetic elaboration of the story, I had thought about the coming of Aslan as a time of not only personal and spiritual liberation, but as a time of liberation for a country under tyranny. And I talked about how in that book, all the animals are afraid that other animals are spies. They think some of the trees are on their side. Nobody quite knows who they can trust. All of those which are the conditions of a society which is under a tyranny. And how the coming of Aslan, and symbolized also in the coming of spring after winter, was a liberation for a whole country. And in fact, I realized in my own poem, and when I come to Romania, I hope to read you some of this poem, I had actually noticed that myself. But now, thanks be to God, we're free to travel, we're free to come and go. And I'm very much looking to coming to a country and which would once have been forbidden to me, and sharing literature, and through that literature a great hope, which would once have been forbidden me to share. It's a glorious thing to think that that can happen, and I'm very much looking forward to it.